Welcome to MATCHplay, where every episode starts with a spark and ends with insight that can only come from personal experience at the highest level. Let's tee up some good conversation. I'm Thad Miller, and welcome back to MATCHplay. Today's conversation is about building a business without ever really thinking of it as a business. Our guest is Dr. David Cohen, a longtime owner and veterinarian at Glenview Animal Hospital. For years, David focused on the one thing above anything else, taking care of animals and the people who loved them. He never set out to scale a veterinary group or build an empire. He built a trusted practice inside his community by being honest, direct, and committed to a higher standard of care. In fact, he'll tell you himself he doesn't see himself as a businessman at all. He's a veterinarian. But eventually, like many practice owners, David faced the decision of whether to sell, who to trust through the process, and what it meant to hand over something built on decades of relationships. This is a conversation about trust, honesty, relationships, and what happens when someone who never planned an exit suddenly decided to start one. So, every episode of MATCHplay starts with a spark, a literal match strike. When the flame burns, I'll ask a few questions, and when the flame goes out, we'll settle in for the round. Dr. Cohen, great to have you. So thrilled to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you ready for the rapid fire? Here we go.
I hope the long match.
Okay, I know you're not a golfer, but if you could watch one golf tournament on TV, what would it be?
Masters.
Good answer. What was your first job, like before being a veterinarian, like when you were a kid?
I worked at a Arby's like roast beef restaurant 3 blocks down from my house at 13 years old, mopping floors.
I love it. I love the Arby's. So you had to make sure that you were mopping floors. Did you move up to the counter at some point?
I moved up, actually, by the time I was 14, I was managing the restaurant.
Great. Listen, working in restaurants is good practice for any type of business in the future. Absolutely. I served hot dogs at a golf shop. Okay. What's your favorite type of dog?
Mine.
Which is what?
Well, I happen to have a toy poodle, but any dog that I have is my favorite. Whenever a client says to me they have the best dog, I always tell them they have the second best dog. I have the best dog.
What's your dog's name?
Lulu. She's a little over 16-year-old toy poodle.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Well, hey, David, again, grateful for you spending the time with us. We're going to get into a little bit on your sale of your practice, which was incredibly successful in the Chicagoland area. But as we mentioned, you focused on less on the growth strategies and more on just delivering great care to people and their pets. Obviously, pets can't tell you how they feel, right? I mean, you got to use your, all the different tests and things like that. So that can be kind of challenging, right? I mean, you're trying to diagnose something they can't communicate.
It can be. You have to have the wisdom to realize that as a veterinarian, we don't always get it right. Mm-hmm. And I let my clients know that. We have the limitations, as you addressed, of the patient not being able to tell us anything personally themselves, having to rely on owners' observations, which aren't always very good or very accurate. And then we have to rely on what we find on physical exam and what we know by experience. But we certainly go into it with less information than do MDs go into. But that's kind of what makes it fun and challenging. And I've always liked figuring things out. When I was a kid, I thought maybe I'd be a criminal detective. And when it comes right down to it, that's kind of what we do in the medical field is we have to be detectives and try to figure things out. And that's one of the biggest challenges of what we do.
Yeah. What's the most exotic animal you ever worked on?
When I was in veterinary school, I had a patient that was a camel, Clyde the camel, if you consider that exotic.
Absolutely.
But in private practice, when I first got into private practice, I would see pretty much anything that came in the door, from fish to pot-bellied pigs to birds to lizards, turtles, gerbils, things like that. But quite honestly, when I went to veterinary school and I was there between 77 and 81, we had very little training on those things. So we had to kind of go into it by the seat of our pants. And as time has gone, there's been a lot of people who have specialized in doing exotics and non-conventional pets. And so I've pretty much gotten away from that. And now all I see is dogs and cats.
I love it. So what made Glenview, so your business, such a trusted part of the community over the years?
My practice was started in 1952 by a very well-respected veterinarian. I think he was president of AHA at one time, and the practice had a very good reputation. And in the mid 70s, I think maybe in 77, he sold the practice to his associate uh, because he had some heart problems and went to go work for the Veterinary Liability and Insurance Trust. And then the veterinarian I purchased the practice from had some personal marital issues and had to get out of Dodge. And so I bought the practice in March of 85. And so I've been there now at this practice for 41 years, but it had been established in 1952. So it already had a good reputation in the community. It was basically a 1.25 veterinary practice when I bought it, and I ran it by myself for about a year and a half and then hired my first associate. The practice is not in an area where the population is growing, but we've grown from this 1.25 veterinary practice to a 4 veterinary practice. And I think we've done that by doing as best a job as we can. I always tell my staff that we should focus on offering the best possible medicine that we can offer. And if we offer the best possible medicine, then everyone will be happy financially. We have a very, very compliant clientele. We're in about the perfect area to practice veterinary medicine. We don't have a lot of clients that make decisions on not taking care of their pets for financial reasons, but we also don't work in an area so affluent that the nannies bring the pets in. So it's an ideal community, upper middle class community
Yeah. Yeah.
that people take care of their pets.
Yeah. I guess that's a critical thing. You're not there for you're there for the maintaining and that relationship. We talk about that. Being a veterinarian is such a relationship driven profession, and you know, that trust over time is what allowed you to build it from, I mean, at the end, I mean, how many times had you grown that business from when you acquired it? I mean, how much bigger was it from when you bought it to when you sold it? The amount of people you saw.
Like I said, we went from 1.25 veterinarians to 4 veterinarians. The income of the practice has gone up about 15-fold since I purchased the practice in 1985.
Yeah.
I haven't looked recently at how many active clients we have, and there's different definitions of active clients. But like I say, we're in an area that the population hasn't grown since I've bought the practice. And there's actually more veterinarians in the area than there were when I bought the practice. Yet our practice was probably one of the smaller practices in the area when I bought it. And now I'm reasonably confident is the largest practice in the area.
Absolutely.
That doesn't happen without taking care of your clients.
Absolutely.
I've always felt good because we have a lot of way more new clients that have transferred to Glenview Animal Hospital from local clinics than we ever send out records of people that aren't satisfied and go to another local clinic. So we maintain our clientele. We've grown. I'm confident that if you could do a barometer of client satisfaction, that we would be right at the top of the heap. From a profitability standpoint, I will tell you that my accountant represents lots of animal hospitals, and without him divulging how other animal hospitals are doing financially, he's always let us know that we're at the top of the heap for profitability. So
Yeah.
we have a very satisfied clientele. I think we do a very good job taking care of our patients, and we're making a nice living doing it.
Yeah.
And I tell my staff, I mean, I've even told clients this, that there's three criteria for every interaction. You have to have a satisfied client, that being the pet owner. You have to have done something positive for that patient, and you have to have made income doing it. And unless you can meet all three of those criteria, you shouldn't have the relationship. We have very, very, very few complaints from our clients. I mean, the nature of people sometimes is to complain, but we have very, very few complaints. And so we don't have to deal with a lot of the stresses that a lot of practice owners have to deal with
Yeah.
client complaints. And I was at two
Well,
other practices before I came to Glenview, and I will tell you that we had far more complaints in those practices than we have at Glenview Animal Hospital.
yeah.
So
So
I'm
focus
proud
on
of
those
that.
three things. That made a difference for you, for sure,
Right.
obviously. So when did selling become something you considered?
Well, my initial goal when I became a veterinarian was to retire in my early to mid 60s. I will be 70 later this year. Um, and that kind of derailed a little bit for all sorts of reasons. But after the COVID outbreak, and after having some of my friends pass and approaching 70, I said to myself, I need to start looking at an exit strategy, which maybe I should have looked at a long time ago, but I wasn't in any hurry to stop doing what I do. I always feel like I'm getting paid to play with dogs and cats, and what better job is there than that? But I am one of these individuals who has a lot of interests outside of work. And so I wasn't worried about um, having the ability to keep busy once I retired. And because I had some friends pass away, and I didn't want to pass away owning the business because I have people in my family that are dependent on me, that I wanted to be able to sell the practice before I passed away and while I still had my health, with the idea that once I retired, that I would still be able to maybe do volunteer work in the community. Or actually, my pipe dream is my wife and I love scuba diving. I would love to build a shelter on one of the Caribbean islands and then get a little condo and maybe travel there 1 week out of the month. In the morning, take care of the pets at the shelter. In the afternoon, go scuba diving.
Oh, that's
That
awesome.
remains to be seen. I still will work probably another couple of years, and I'm enjoying working still. Nothing really has changed since I sold, but the impetus was my age and seeing the people around me passing, and I said it was time to sell.
Well, and obviously when you made established it was time to sell, and you said it a couple times, you don't see yourself as a business person other than you did great
No,
business, obviously.
I'm not a good business person at all. When I went to veterinary school, I don't know about today, but there were zero business classes in veterinary school. I have the advantage of having a father, although he's passed in 2018, who ran a large business with a couple hundred employees, and I have a brother who's a tax lawyer with a CPA, an MBA, law degree, and a master's in tax law, who could give me good business advice.
Yeah.
And I kind of ran the business by the seat of my pants. But like I said earlier, if you take care of your clients, you take care of your patients, the rest of it will follow along with that. Did I do the best job in negotiating contracts to purchase things and things like that? I'm sure not. Did I make the business as profitable as I could have made it if I had had an MBA or something like that? Probably not, but that was never my goal. My goal was to make a living doing what I love to do. And there are not many people in this country and world who are able to make a living doing something that they really love to do.
No, that's well said. And obviously this overwhelming process of selling the business, what that looks like, you leaned on Jessica Pasta with DVMmatch, and you mentioned that you were, if it wasn't for her, you probably wouldn't have considered doing that. And give a little background on that relationship.
Well, I met Jessica, I don't know, 20 years ago or something like that, when she was working for a supply company. And I trusted her. I'm pretty good at reading people. And I felt that she had integrity and was hardworking and just was really a sweet person. And when I decided to start looking about selling, I knew that she worked for a private equity group that was purchasing practices. So I started talking to her and started getting some numbers together. And then I kind of got cold feet because I wasn't sure if that's what I wanted to do. And I looked at the options of trying to sell it myself. And I thought, and I still think retrospectively, that I have a very saleable practice. I think that we meet the criteria that any individual veterinarian or any group would want to buy. I think we tick a lot of the boxes. And actually, maybe one of them is that I'm not the world's greatest business person, and that as much as we're a well-run practice with very high client satisfaction and very good profitability, I was pretty convinced that somebody who could run a business better than I could do even a better job, especially at the management level. I've never been much of a people manager. I'm kind of the person that hires people that don't need management, because I never really liked being a boss or telling people what to do. I like being a colleague. But I had to make the decision as to whether or not I wanted to go this alone or look for a broker to help me through the process. And going it alone, I thought, well, I can get very good advice from my brother. In fact, my brother's law firm has handled the sale of several veterinary practices, and my accountant represents many veterinary practices. So I figured I could get good, sagacious advice on purchasing a practice. But I also didn't feel that I wanted to go it alone, and wanted to spend all the time involved in the due diligence in that entire process.
Sure.
And, I like, I'm sure a lot of practice owners would get letters sometimes several days in a row, sometimes every other week, from brokers seeing if I was interested in using their services to sell the practice. When I found out that Jessica was doing that, I didn't need to look any further. Not because I necessarily felt that she had the most experience, because I'm sure there were brokers out there that are doing it a lot longer than Jessica and had a lot more experience. But the number one issue, and pretty much the only issue, was trust. And I trusted that she would give me the best advice and work harder for me than anybody else. And to me, that's what it was all about. It wasn't about your company per se.
Right.
I didn't know the first thing about your company. It was about the fact that I knew somebody, that I had a relationship, and I trusted her implicitly. And I felt that if she didn't think that she could do a good job for me, she would tell me to go elsewhere. And as it turned out, I couldn't be happier.
Yeah.
The process went great. I think I asked her to do more than she signed up for, and she never balked at that. She helped me along the entire way, and like I said, it worked out for the best of everybody. I think it worked out for the best of me. I think it worked out for the best of my employees, my clients, my patients, for your firm, for Jessica, and for the group that bought me. I think everybody's happy.
Yeah.
And I had two of my veterinarians out of two of my three associates had worked for veterinarians that were bought out by one of the larger private equity groups. No reason to mention a name. And they both had horrible experiences. And that was my biggest trepidation in this process, was being able to sell them on this idea that I was going to now turn over the management of the business to private equity.
Right.
And I think that they've been very happy as well. Nothing's really changed for them. They're making more money. They're able to practice the way that they've been practicing all along. Now, like I say, it's only been 2 months, and there haven't been any changes made. And I'm actually looking forward to some changes. I think some changes need to be made, because I think any business can find ways of improving, but everything is going great. Our clients are
that's wonderful.
satisfied, and I'm satisfied. and I'm confident that the group that purchased us is satisfied.
What do you feel like you learned about yourself in going through the process of selling?
That I never want to have to do this again. Okay, that I never have to want to go through this process. One of the bumps in the road was that my practice manager, years ago when I bought the practice, I was the practice manager. I did everything from the book work to the ordering to the hiring to the cutting the grass to the polishing the floors on the weekends in the
Sure.
middle of the night. I did it all. And as the business grew, I had to learn to delegate responsibilities. And many years ago, I turned over the management of the business to a practice manager who did a very good job, but she had some health issues at the start of the due diligence and couldn't continue on getting all the information that was necessary for the sale.
Sure.
And that was tough and anxiety ridden. And that was some of the stuff that Jessica helped me with that I don't think she signed up for. But she helped me through that process. And as it turns out, everything went great.
Yeah.
But as far as what I've learned from this process, I would say that I would leave the due diligence and the negotiations up to somebody other than yourself in this process. I'm glad I made that decision. And there's obviously a financial cost with that, but I think it was probably the best money I've ever spent in my life because A, it freed me up to be a veterinarian. B, it freed me up to still maintain a personal life because I have a great personal life with a large family. And it allowed me, I think, to get a better deal for the practice than I would have gotten doing it by myself.
Yeah. No, so that'd be your advice. Turn over that component of it, focus on because
Absolutely.
and you obviously get the opportunity, you got the opportunity to pick who bought the practice. So what was important to you about who was
Okay.
going to
So
buy it? Yeah.
I told Jessica that my criteria were that I needed to meet all these criteria. I needed to make sure that my clients are going to be taken care of, that my patients are going to be taken care of, that my staff was going to be taken care of, and that I would get enough money out of this to retire.
Yeah.
And I told her that I wanted to get a group in there that would meet those criteria. Again, I never did a lot of due diligence in that respect, and I didn't interview these various entities. But it seems to me that there are basically two methods or schools of thought of these groups that come in and purchase practices. One of them come in figuring they know how to run your business better than you do or better than you did, and come in guns a-blazing and making a lot of changes. And the other type of groups that come in and say, okay, we're going to look for practices that are well-run practices that are profitable because we have to pay our shareholders and let them do their thing because their thing has been done properly. And so I told her that was the kind of group I was looking for.
Yeah.
And so she pared that down. We talked to several groups and then pared it down to three and then had one-on-one meetings with all three groups. And then we ended up with where we ended up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad it worked out well. And she sure enjoyed working with you since it had such a long relationship up to that. And she obviously wanted the best thing for you just because of that too. And the staff and the patients,
But I'll
and
say this about Jessica. Yes, we've had a close working relationship over the years, but as confident as I can be in what somebody other than myself does, I'm confident that she would do that kind of work for anybody.
yeah,
That's just the kind of person that she is.
you're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did I get personalized attention because we had known each other all these years? Maybe, but I don't know that she wouldn't do that for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. That's sweet. She's a special person. So, all right. So we're going to wrap this up and there is a golf bend to this. And I know you play a little bit of golf, but not enough to maybe give a tip. You're more into jujitsu and other things, but we discovered that you had a golf story that you wanted to share. And I thought I'd ask if you could tell that golf story.
Sure. Maybe 20 years ago, I was at a local restaurant, which is one of the busiest restaurants in the country. It's a fish restaurant, and having dinner there. We ate there on a regular basis. And across the room, I saw Chichi Rodriguez, and I remembered watching Chichi since I was a kid, and I always liked him because he was very animated. Not all golfers are animated; it's kind of a gentleman's sport, but Chichi was animated, and I kept seeing him get up and walk around the restaurant and sit down and get up and walk around the restaurant, sit down, and I realized that he was looking for somebody to recognize him. There's a lot of people that when they're in the limelight, they don't want to be bothered. But when the limelight burns out like your match, all of a sudden nobody's noticing me anymore. And I'm pretty good at reading people, and I just got the sense that Chi-Chi wanted to be noticed. So I went up to him. I go, Chi-Chi, my man, my favorite player from the senior tour. And Chi-Chi would make a putt, a good putt, and he would take his putter like it was a sword, and then put it like he was putting in his scabbard or whatever you call it that holds a sword. And I said, give me one of those, Chi-Chi. So he did that, and I had him sign an autograph for me. He sat down, enjoyed his dinner, didn't have to get up and walk around anymore. That is my only experience with professional golf in my life. I'm not much of a golfer. I enjoy the game. I'm a terrible golfer, but I'm an honest golfer. I don't cheat at the game.
Well, that is wonderful. And that's a great story. And Chi-Chi is surely missed because he was a big personality for sure, and his flamboyant clothes. And yes, he's a wonderful man. So, well, Dr. Cohen, thank you so much for your time. Great personal story about your transition to your veterinary hospital. I'm grateful for the time, and thanks everybody for tuning in to Match Play, and we'll see you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You got it. Thank you, Doctor.